Yo, what's good everybody? And today, there were 11 rookies in the CDL who made their debut this year. And let's just say that COD's been on a pretty nice streak now of multiple years in a row of legit insanely great rookie classes, with the new age of young COD pros taking over and really making their mark on the scene. And so today, we are ranking all 11 COD rookie seasons this year, worst to best, and having a good time talking about all of them. So I hope you guys are ready to strap in and have a good conversation about this. Without further ado, guys, let's get right into this one. Let's go. Alrighty, so at number 11, there's a guy here who didn't really get his full shot at glory. He didn't really get his true chance. I mean, it was kind of a tough situation, to be fair. And so at number 11 is Mental with LAG. He was kind of brought in stage 5 as like a Hail Mary type situation. LAG needed some sort of change, so they brought in the former Gears of War pro to come in and hope that this could work, and it just definitely didn't. I mean, Mental obviously didn't play very well. He struggled in all 3 game modes, and the whole situation just didn't work well with their roster. Not to mention that it happened in stage 5, so they were already behind the 8 ball when it comes to practice as a squad and getting that work in as a unit. They were behind. He was put in a tough situation, but he definitely did not play well at all. And not even mentioning like statistics, where he was basically like dead last or second to last in a lot of categories. So it definitely wasn't a good season overall for Mental in his short stint with LAG, but to be fair, he did have the least amount of time with his squad out of any of the rookies by far. So yeah, these got to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there when it comes to time with the team. So at number 10 is another guy who had an overall tough go with his squad, and that's Fire with the Paris Legion. He got brought in at the start of the season with Scraps, Classic, and Aqua as the 4th for Paris. And basically after the stage 2 major, he was subbed out for Temp, who was coming from LA Thieves. I mean, just overall as a squad, it didn't go well, where they had like a top 10 at like stage 1, then a top 12 at stage 2. But I mean, to Fire's credit, I guess, it didn't really get much better for Paris after they ended up benching him. But Fire had a lot of missed opportunities overall. Inside Respawn definitely wasn't great. He had some decent moments inside of Search and Destroy for sure, where we at least saw some like flashes and some potential with him, especially like in his first blood rates and his ability to find those first bloods overall for Paris. But overall, not a great performance from Fire. And, you know, it kind of goes to show where he's probably not going to be getting a spot this year in the CDL either. But overall, not a great stint in the CDL for Fire. And he justifiably got benched after that stage 2 major, where he just wasn't playing up to the standard. So overall, tough stuff. So now at number 9, we've got another really interesting player. Some of these guys are kind of tough to grade here, but at number 9, we got Venom with LA Thieves. After his stint with Wester, where they won the first 4 cups in the AM scene, in March, he replaced Temp, who then Temp went over to Paris to replace Fire. The tough thing for Venom and kind of grading Venom is that LA Thieves went on this stretch of so many roster changes where you had like maybe one stage to kind of see this roster, and then Venom had a roster change with that team, and then it was just weird. So basically, like in the stage 2 groups, they had one roster, but then they dropped Slasher for Draza going into stage 2 major, and Venom never really got that full shot, but they finished like top 6 at both major stage 2 and stage 3 with the different rosters as well, with Hook then in the lineup. And so there was just so many different iterations with those rosters on LA Thieves. It felt like it was kind of hard to get a great gauge on how good Venom really was, but he was definitely at his best in Search and Destroy, and he contributed a lot during his time on that roster in SMD and looked really, really good. But inside both Hardpoint and Control, it never really felt like it really clicked for him, and that's why he ended up getting benched later in the season for the rest of the year. Just a tough overall situation for Venom, and hopefully eventually we can see him again in the CDL, because I think he still has something to prove, and we didn't get a full, real great look at what Venom could bring to a squad in his time with the LA Thieves overall. So now at number 8, we've got Zaptius, all right? And it was a really, really weird situation for Zap as well. Again, he dominated on that Wester roster as well in those first 4 cups. And stage 3, he joined London with Paulehx and Zed and Shawnee. And they actually, like, they placed top 8 at the stage 3 major. And you're like, okay, all right, we can see something here. And Zap showed that he had potential, that he could hang with the guys in the CDL. But again, with that London squad, with how like discombobulated they were, and they end up replacing Zaptius and Zed with Alex and Afro there. And so then he went over to Paris and joined that squad to replace Classic. So then he had the Scraps, Aqua, and Temp situation, and they placed like top 10 at stage 4, then they placed top 12 at stage 5 major. It just feel like there was just a lot of different things that didn't come through for Zap there. So early on in the year, it felt like the trades weren't fully coming through. Like he wasn't converting like he should be converting with that London squad. But then things started getting a little bit better, and I thought we started seeing some improvement with like Zap and Paul, like in that London versus FaZe series where London was hanging for a while and played pretty well. Like we saw some nice moments there from Zaptius. I thought was pretty promising moving forward. Then he heads over to Paris, where again, like I thought he really improved like in his trades and his team play with Paris. And once again, in his debut, he came out frying against FaZe and looked really, really good again, where we saw like that legit like hang-in potential with some of the greatest players in the CDL, but it just never fully clicked for that team either. And so it's hard to say exactly how good Zaptius is. But again, we saw him in S&D where he had some nice potential in Search and Destroy, where like he was like 9th in the CDL in first bloods per 9 rounds. So he was doing a good job of getting those. He was actually even like middle of the pack and still winning his first blood. So he was getting a lot of them and still converting at a decent rate. So I mean, he was valuable in that regard, but overall inside respawns, it was still a struggle as well. So it was a tough gauge overall. But again, that whole Paris team struggled converting in respawns as well. So there's always those tough situational areas with those types of guys where I think there's still some potential with Zaptius too, just like Venom. It's definitely not convincing enough to say that they like to pound the table and say that they need a roster spot heading into this season. But overall, still a very respectable season for Zaptius inside the CDL with 2 different teams, and overall a decent contributing player in the CDL. So now at number 7, another player who got put in some tough situations this season, and that is Diamondcon with the New York Subliners. So coming into the year, he was kind of one of those starters. He was on the stage 1 roster with Asim, Mac, and Clay. They had some success. They finished 3rd at the stage 1 major, and Diamondcon looked really, really good. Obviously, there's kind of that iconic like snaking moment on Crossroads, I think, towards like tank or whatever, like the sandbags on my right side, and people were kind of hating on him for that. But besides that, I really, really liked a lot of what Diamondcon was showing early on, but then things started struggling a little bit in that stage 2. They ended up getting top 8 as a team, and that's when he was benched. It was weird situations with him and like Asim, and there was times where I felt like they were like definitely on different pages and not connecting well. He was definitely like a fast-paced AR and got into a lot of engagements. He had a few really, really nice like S&D clutches as well, where he was making some big time plays for him. And I thought he started getting more patient and playing a little bit better as time passed. I thought there was some potential there with Diamondcon. I really, really did. Like, he's a guy that in the right situation, I think could definitely be a CDL pro, but he's right on the fringe of that, like, okay, locked and loaded stud, or maybe needs a little bit more time to get better at the game and improve a little bit. So overall, an interesting season for him where he again played for about those 2 times, but then he got thrown back into the fire in stage 5 when Clay was there, and that really hurt him statistically on the year. You know, you're thrown back into the starting lineup when Clay takes time away from the game, and it was just a tough go for DC in that time. So overall, I think DC has a lot to add to a roster and can definitely be a valuable piece. And he got so screwed at the end of the year with missing Challengers champs and getting thrown into the flames with the NYSL. So overall, tough stuff for him. I think he has a lot of potential, and I like DC a lot as a player, and he's 7th on the list. So now into the top 6. And these top 6 guys, all of them are 100% deserving of being in the CDL moving forward. These guys are very, very good players, insanely talented, with tons of clutches across the board. These guys are beasts. With that said, at number 6 is Paulehx with the London Royal Ravens. He debuted in stage 2, replacing Parasite on that roster with Shawnee, Dylan, and Zed. And they didn't, place well off the rip. They got, top 10 at stage 2's major. Then you had all those roster changes. Zaptius for Alex and Afro coming in for Zed and Zap, and all of these changes. But the one definite consistent thing for London throughout this time was Paulehx making clutch plays in Search and Destroy. This guy had so many like 3v2s or 1v2s or 3v1s, and like highlighted, I think, by that one 3v1 against the Ultra on Moscow, where he clutched up, and there was some like really nice plays, some high upside, like showing his slaying ability type games, where he had like the 40 bomb in control against NYSL on Checkmate, and overall just some really impressive series. Like there was one against Dallas in stage 4 where he just felt like he took over and played some really good COD. So overall, I think his S&D upside is like legit insane, where he could be like an elite search and destroy player. There was just times where he would like disappear inside respawns, and you're like, man, normally Paulehx fries on this map or fries against this team, and then suddenly it's just like he gets smoked, goes like double negative. And you're like, what in the world? And so because of that inconsistency, I kept him a little bit lower on the list, but there's some other, obviously some really talented players moving forward here on the list. And overall, Paulehx is a beast. I definitely think he deserves to be in the CDL next year. And so it's exciting to hear the rumors about him and Methods teaming up on that Washington, D.C. team, because I think he definitely deserves a spot for sure. So now at number 5, the top 5, baby. Neptune is at number 5, the Florida Mutineers. It was a weird situation for Neptune early on. He replaced Havoc going into the year. Neptune was a former Halo pro coming over to COD for this first season. We were waiting to see that insane Shotzi-like potential, and it took a while to see. He started off really slow. In that middle part of the year, after that stage 1, he started showing it and looked insanely good. The amount of like 1v3s and 1v2s in S&D that this guy had, not to mention that he's a former Halo pro, like he didn't play Search and Destroy. So for him to come into COD like in the offseason, really work on the S&D, grind out those S&D wagers, get in the game and play really good in Search and Destroy, basically from the start, is really impressive. And I think really shows his upside in S&D as a player moving forward here into what looks like a really nice roster with the New York subliners here with Hydra and Neptune and Clay and Crim. Like that could be a ton of fun. But overall, again, we saw not only the S&D upside, but we saw like the hardpoint upside, like that. Speaking of NYSL, when like Neptune took over the game on that Checkmate hardpoint against NYSL, he went like 37-15 and absolutely dominated. And we saw some huge improvement from him season long in like his patience and like spawn play. And I really thought that was highlighted by, there was like a moment on a Moscow hardpoint against London in stage 4 where he was on rotations for P3 and like I thought played insanely patient inside bank and like on pillar by bank to finesse and play his life for his teammates to collapse towards the hill. And like we saw a lot of those developments in his patience in his game and in Search and Destroy and his ability to find those first bloods. And not to mention how many times on Express he like took over the game. It was crazy sometimes. Like his ace against LA Thieves in round 11, nuts. And so you saw some of his upside as a player, and that's what gets me really excited about him heading in to Vanguard. And I thought he had an awesome season, even though the Mutineers weren't winning and they were kind of like that top 6-7 type team all season long. They never really got to that next level. But the big critique that we've heard, at least now from the Florida players, is that Neptune's comms can be a little weak and he doesn't communicate very well. And so that's probably the biggest weakness in his game, and why a big reason for why he's behind some of these other guys that showed that upside as well, is just some of those intangibles and learning those things. And I think being with Crim and Clay and having that amount of communication on your team will be huge for him heading into Vanguard. Oh baby, now we are into the top 4, and these were really tough. I thought it was gonna be easy coming in. I'm like, top 4, it's easy as it gets. But I had a really tough time between 3 and 4 actually, and trying to decide who had the better year. So at number 4, I decided to go with Afro. I mean, this dude is a baller. He was added to the roster late. He was added in stage 4 to the team with Alex replacing Zap and Zed. At that time, the placings didn't work out for the team. They were top 12 at stage 4 major, top 10 at stage 5 major. But what you immediately noticed when Afro joined the team was his gun skill was insane. The dude's got a gunny, and that's facts. And he was popping 3 pieces, 2 pieces, doing some nastiness around the map, even right when he joined the team. Obviously, I think most of the COD community would agree that Alex just wasn't a good fit for the team at this point, and he just didn't play very well overall. And so maybe if they had a different 4th, or maybe you kept Zed in the lineup, or you kept Zaptius in the lineup, this team could have really found its groove and had a little bit more, shown a little bit more upside at least. Afro as an individual though, it's hard to take away from his accomplishments as an individual player. And when you watch him, you see the potential this guy has. with his playmaking ability and just overall just as a playmaker. There were some times you're like, holy crap, Afro's insane. He's crazy. Like he popped some nice streaks like on Raid, and even against Optic he had some nice moments. Like there was a ace against NYSL in stage 5 on Moscow that he popped off on, and like you're like, oh my goodness, like there's some nice plays to be made here from Afro. And statistically, he was insanely, when you look at his stats on the season or compared to everybody else, it's really insane. Like obviously he played less games than most of the CDL, of course, where, you know, he had like what, 15 or 18 hardpoint matches or something along those lines, but I could probably pull it up right here. It's crazy. He had the 6th best hardpoint KD, the 8th best hardpoint damage per death in the CDL. Then he was still very, very good in Search and Destroy, 14th best KD in S&D. Then he had the 5th most first bloods per 9 rounds, and he still had a top 16 first blood win percentage. And then in Control, he had the 4th best KD and the 11th most damage per death in KD or in Control. So, I mean, he was all over the board. And so statistically, it's insanely impressive what he did in 2 stages. And overall came in the league immediately, even on a bad roster, and put up really impressive stats. And then just straight off the eye test, he was unbelievably impressive and had elite plays around the map. And so overall, I really wouldn't have a problem with somebody putting him higher than 4, but because of the longevity of the guy who's at number 3, who's been in a lot longer and had a lot more team success, I thought that was a worthy tiebreaker. And not to mention, the guy at number 3 put up some stats and did some nastiness on the map himself. These top 4 guys are all like locked and loaded studs in the CDL, and Neptune's right there in that conversation too. And so it's pretty impressive to have a class this deep of rookies. We have like 5 guys who like are legit impressive, insane talents in the CDL. So at number 3 now is he's the French phenom. He's Hydra for NYSL. And this is what I was saying, like there was some, you know, legit arguments with him and Afro, but at the end of the day, Hydra season long, when he came into that squad, replacing Diamondcon after stage 2, I mean, they came in immediately and they were a top 2 team. They finished 2nd at the stage 3 major, and they beat FaZe in the winners finals of that major, like the iconic 1v1 of Hydra and Simp in that stage. So there's a bunch of moments there where like Hydra is the real deal. And season long, especially in hardpoint, he showed how good he is. And NYSL went on an insane streak of hardpoint wins once Hydra joined the squad, and he ended up with the highest KD in hardpoint out of any COD Pro, 1.17. He had the 6th most damage per life inside of hardpoint. And then in S&D, is just as impressive. He had some unbelievably great S&D moments, and he really improved as the year went along. And I think we saw an insanely impressive development in his patience and team play in Search and Destroy. There was a few moments on Express where I was like, dude, like this is a play that Hydra would not have made 2 months ago. And he's here playing off of his teammates, maximizing his line of sight. Hydra's doing it all for this team in hardpoint S&D. Control was the one area where, you know, there's some question marks with Hydra, so he wasn't as well-rounded as Afro was across all 3 game modes, with how dominant he was in hardpoint and still insanely great in Search and Destroy, plus the team success that NYSL had in stage 3, stage 4. Overall, he had the tiebreaker there for the number 3 spot. So now the top 2, and I think all of us probably know which way we're going with this, but at number 2, we got Standy. He came in immediately in stage 2, replacing Major Maniac in the middle of the stage, and right out the gate, beat the guy that he looked up to the most in the CDL, Scump. In his first game, they beat Optic, and Standy dominated, and they didn't look back. Standy played fantastic, and that was really capped off by their stage 5 rocker resurrection at the stage 5 LAN major, and just truly like impressive play from the beginning to end with Standy. And the big thing is, like, you know, what would have happened to this rocker team if Standy didn't join this team? And the idea of like, okay, yeah, they may not have ever been a top 5 type team on the season if they don't bring in Standy. And he truly changed the direction of that team. He's such like a Zuma or Envoy type player. He gets in your face, he hits weird routes, he plays odd angles, he he slays out, he plays in your spawn, and he's such a nice, like a really like finesse, ratty type player, and just a ton of fun to watch. And not to mention, you know, again, he dominated and he played great across all 3 game modes and looked great season long. So you gotta respect Standy and how well he played across the board, and overall like a high paced player with still a good KD. He played fast in Search and Destroy, had a high KD. He was finding first bloods, but had a high win percentage in first bloods. He was an insanely valuable player across the board with the eye test, and statistically, the dude's a beast, and obviously had an unbelievable season with a LAN event win. You gotta respect that, the ice in the veins, and Standy lived up to the hype for sure. So coming in at number 1, I mean, come on. The Rookie of the Year, it's Insight, obviously, with the Toronto Ultra coming in, replacing Methods in Stage 2. And, you know, that's replacing a very respectable COD pro in Methods. And you come in and immediately that team wins Stage 2, beating Atlanta FaZe at the major. And Insight had an unbelievable season, and especially in Search and Destroy, where this guy was an X factor, a difference maker season long. The dude was always making clutch plays. His first series against LA Thieves, he had 18 kills on Miami. He was doing things like that all year long against the best teams in the CDL, and Toronto was the top 2 team, the second best team the whole rest of the year. Of course, all the way down to champs, going to the grand finals against FaZe. And Insight was the key that unlocked that squad. The organization, the positioning. Insight became known for how, like basically being the backbone of that squad positioning wise and their setups, and just such a reliable player to find those trades, playing off his teammates. He did it all for him. Again, statistically, he performed the top 7 KD in hardpoint, 3rd most damage per life in hardpoint, 2nd best KD in the CDL, 1.24 in S&D. Overall, a beast in control. He was still an absolute unit. 7th best control KD, 4th most damage per life in control. Insight did it all. He's a unit, and you gotta respect it when talking about these rookies. This is about as good of a rookie class as you're gonna see in COD history. And like even last year in Modern Warfare, we had, you know, Shotzzy and MVP and those types of players, Awakening, and all those guys that had some insane things. Of course, Awakening's debut was unreal, but season long having, you know, 5 or 6 like mainstay rookies who are getting a spot in the CDL the following year, all the top 6 will be, assuming Paulehx ends up being on that Washington, DC roster. You gotta love it. All these guys have huge potential going into next year. I'm excited to see them play, and they all had an awesome Cold War season. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say down in the comments below. Did I get the list right? Did I get the list wrong? What would you guys change? I'd love to see your comments down below. But like I always say, I'm trying to do this full time, and I can't do that without you guys. So I really do appreciate all the support, the likes, the comments, the shares, anything that you guys can do. I really do appreciate it. Keep your eye out also for a COD history video that's coming out. I'm gonna be doing another one in the veins of what I did like 2 years ago. So keep your eyes out for that one, hopefully coming out on Monday. Turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. But as always, guys, I'm your boy SalvationsElite, and guys, we'll see ya next time. I'm out.